So, Lights of Masquerade and Gung Ho, the episode that follows, episodes 25 and 26, aren't sequels of each other. The episode after Islands of Illusion is a two-parter, but this is not. I don't think that's a problem. Of the problems this episode has, that is not one of them. And it has enough going on. Um, there are some really good things about this episode I'll get to, but mostly this episode seems very aware of the main problem, which is Tommy. So the issue is also kind of the joy. They have a new cast member they need to integrate, but the problem is that the five previous characters have spent so long together, and the Sentai footage makes it, especially in this episode, almost impossible to integrate him. So much so that in character, Jason has to say, "Where's Tommy? How can we get in touch with Tommy?" The issue of Tommy is one that we're on the fourth episode of this particular issue. And when I talk about Spitflower, like this issue especially exemplifies it. The issue is that they have all this footage that Sentai where that Green Ranger is so other, but they didn't shoot any further footage with the Green Ranger shoot for the American audiences, essentially, is what it looks like. Um, I think Jason and Tommy both have a similar problem as well, in that I feel like I don't know them very well, except for expressly a long time ago, episode count wise. We have an episode where we find out Jason is competitive. He really defers a lot more to Zordon and in some ways Tommy than to take charge. Um, I think I've seen Zach take charge more, honestly, which is weird because when we have our nostalgia lenses on, we think of Jason as the leader. Like we think of the Red Ranger as the leader, and Jason sort of sets the trend going forward. But it doesn't feel like that. He feels deferent in a way. I guess maybe you could maintain that Jason still feels in over his head, but it's so hard to say. I think especially because these two episodes come out late October, October 25th for this, and Gung Ho on the 30th in 1993, that they feel they have to do some kind of Halloween event, I guess. And coming off of the Green with Evil miniseries, um, I don't know if they really had to. I do think the Super Putty stuff could have been its own episode. They use it to tie essentially the two episodes together, but it feels reminiscent a little bit of a different drum in a way that's fine but not okay. It's certainly for Billy a better moment than the last big Billy moment, which was with Dark Warrior. This feels much more like Billy from Peace, Love, and Woe, or even from Punks, where he's sort of more aware, he's more mature. He goes after what he perceives as a bad guy to either figure out if the bad guy that is the Frankenstein creature is Tommy or not, which later the second version of the Frankenstein monster is Tommy. That was his costume. Um, it's also interesting that both Rita and Alpha, even though they've been in slumber for a long time, have an idea of Halloween and a costume party, and they use it to their own effects. Alpha does it to walk amongst the humans and to party with the Power Rangers, which I think is kind of amazing. Um, and Rita uses it as a way to kind of infiltrate the party and create probably the thing that drags the most in the episode, which normally I would say it has a pacing issue, but there wasn't as much of a pacing issue in this episode until the like dance with Frankenstein scene that did create it. This is such an odd episode because it's a continuation of the romance stuff from Spitflower, but even more obviously so. And it's about like Rita wanting to destroy the world, but then they get the plot of the Super Putties mixed up with the plot from this Frankenstein creature who's overpowered, which sort of feels like it's depowering the other Rangers in order to make Tommy important and special and sell toys, but it doesn't seem right because Frankenstein as a creature is not as powerful as some of the other ones we see. They have a lasso technique. They introduce fire breath after they're grown, which why? And I can't tell if it's an issue with the Sentai version of the Frankenstein monster is just better and more powered. Maybe it happens earlier in the season. Uh, but it really sort of drags the episode down because the super putties feel more interesting. I kind of want, looking at this narratively as an adult, the super putty thing to explain why there are some putties in earlier episodes that absolutely look different and have like natural rock armor versus like the classic gray putties. And maybe Gung Ho will give us that sort of resolution. But as it stands, I think the Frankenstein monster is maybe the worst part of this episode. I do like a lot of the opening where normally I would say the pacing of it is really bad. I actually think in the context here, the romance plot works because there's also sort of a Bulk and Skull romance. It's kind of this non-traditional, this is where you see them being best friends, this is where you see them not being bullies. Um, I thought contractually we were just going to get the slapstick and then nothing more, and then we got more. I actually think their idea, Skull's idea of doing a costume contest entry, which is him as a young Elvis and Bulka's old Elvis, both of them are having a lot of fun, and I actually think it's a genius costume idea for them. In fact, I might steal it for my game. Um, they end up coming just as punks, which again, I don't think the Power Rangers show knows what a punk actually is, but in the early 90s, we had like bands like the Mighty Mighty Boss Tones and the Cherry Poppin' Daddies. So like we also didn't know what punk was in the early 90s in mainstream. So I can't actually fault them for that very much. Also, for people that have never conceived of what a 90s Halloween slash masquerade party would look like, the creepy, like uncanny valley ventriloquist doll head decorations were kind of a thing. Trini dressing as, I'm assuming, a Pocahontas Native American character is not something that would have like spun people out. I do think it's interesting that Jason and Bulk both end up doing costumes at different points that have that same Robin Hood Peter Pan vibe, but the Bulk looks like Jason in some ways. Also, apparently, even though Bulk, I think it's Bulk's room, has a Clarissa Explains It All purple wall 90s feel to it, which is very not punk. There's just very interesting, bizarre Pee-wee's Playhouse thing that Bulk and Skull do, and this room kind of exemplifies that. So I think they're camp. I'm not sure they're punk, but that's neither here nor there. Uh, he, and this is the thing from the 90s is that in the 90s, we were all sort of like enamored by the 50s. Like Amy Jo Johnson is going to do a movie called Susie Q eventually, where she plays a 1950s ghost. So it's not actually out of character for Bulk to have a weight loss shake machine from the 50s. What is out of character is that a lot of times that machine was used more for female characters than it was for male characters. Like in Mad Men in the 60s, when you see the weight loss episode. Um, so it's interesting a male character is using it, but he is. Yeah, I think the thing that really brings this episode down for me more than anything wasn't the romance aspect of it, and wasn't the, well, kind of a two-parter, but not really a two-parter, super-parter thing. Because I don't mind that Angela and Zach's still going after Angela. It's kind of nice. I love that he does like an Egyptian costume. Uh, I actually kind of like Kimberly and Tommy together. I just wish I knew more about both Kimberly and I think it's because they're supposed to be avatars that you can print yourself on as a kid is why we don't know a lot about them. But we know quite a bit more about Trini than anyone else, and it doesn't feel equal. Like we feel like we know Billy and Trini, and they've really made Billy the most important ranger, even though he's not the leader. Like the show does this interesting thing, especially in this episode, where it highlights intelligence, but then it also highlights athleticism. It sort of feels like it's in concert with a 90s game show like Legends of the Hidden Temple that specifically had like the steps of knowledge, but then also the physical stuff. And they talk about that in the documentary for Legends of the Hidden Temple of why they paired boys and girls together because the girls could pull the boys through one of the boys could pull the girls through the other. I don't know if I agree with that, but it is what they said. And in the 90s and the time period, that was real thinking, and we're seeing that still today. So, um, I don't know. It's interesting that in the Google episode listings, Gung Ho is also called Life's a Masquerade because it could be a two-part episode, and they premiered 5 days apart in 1993, October 25th and 30th again. So it really does feel like they exist together, but they're not a two-parter, which is interesting because right after Gung Ho and Life's a Masquerade, we have one episode buffer, but then we get a two-parter Island of Illusion, which is going to be about what the Google thing says about the Rangers overcoming their fear. Honestly, I don't know enough about them except to know that Zach fears bugs, but also things that are just bug-like and are not actually bugs. Um, I don't know. I really do like the show, and I can see why it really did grab all of us in the early 90s that ended up being grabbed by it. But I think in trying to make essentially six superheroes that people can imprint themselves on, you sort of lose it because it also feels like it's trying to be a Saved by the Bell type show. Like it's doing a romance thing. I know Gung Ho has some elements of bringing back Jason's one personality trait, which is the idea that he's super competitive, which people kind of dog him for. And they claim martial arts is not about that, but also the Karate Kid movies exist. So I don't know. I know it's about teaching kids the positive aspects of martial arts, but it doesn't work when also your like secondary villain anti-heroes are basically Babu and Squat, but also Bulk and Skull. Uh, yeah, I don't know. There's good about Life's a Masquerade, and it seems like a window into 90s. It's also the first time where the pacing was longer in the cuts and in the shots, but it didn't take me out of it. And even though I knew some of the stuff that was being destroyed was model work and not real places, it didn't exactly take me out of it. If you can sort of just accept what the universe offers to you in this show, you can sort of make it work. My issue is that I love this season. I idealize it, but I feel like seasons after this, after even the Zordon run, work really hard to give every character a moment. And this show kind of did that earlier, but in bringing in Tommy has sort of stopped doing that and has sort of started receding from it, but hasn't pushed Tommy to the forefront. Is he the greatest ranger? I sort of watched this wanting to like redeem Tommy in my eyes because I know that eventually, he's the mentor. I know he's the ranger that sticks around longest. I think Billy is probably second. Um, I don't know. I don't know. Um, I'm just, it's nice that they're attempting the romance thing and trying to do something that feels Saved by the Bell, um, proto Dawson's Creek-esque a little bit. It doesn't take away from it. It just, I don't know them enough to know to root for Zach and Angela. Angela's one line where she's like, go back to your tomb when Zach tries to get her to dance is hilarious. Um, I wish the Frankenstein monster were more of a threat. And I think maybe in the Sentai they are. Maybe it's like they see Frankenstein in their dreams and Witch Pandora brings up Frankenstein to life. Here, Frankenstein is just sort of a loose plot thread to introduce the super putties. But again, we've seen super putties in other episodes because we've seen putties that don't look like the gray and they're darker and they've got like natural armor. And this is something in the TTRPG as well as there are levels of putties. Now, normally levels of putties are level one, level two is people change putties, like from Pineapple the Clown from the No Clowning Ron episode. Uh, but there are also there are some monsters that have these kind of bone armor elements, but they never really reference that in the game. I reference it in my tabletop game because I'm absolutely fascinated by these different levels of putties, and I came up with a couple different ways they happen, including one which is just exclusive to Angel Grove, because Angel Grove for me is a magical place, so I've made it a unique entity in the universe. Um, yeah. It's interesting. I still think the putties as kind of not even henchmen, like cogs in the machine. I still think the putties are some of the best designed visually of these. Some of them are just overdone and some of them are not done enough. Yeah. So that's Masquerade. It was good. I really enjoyed there's a lot to enjoy in this episode. Is it a perfect episode? No. It didn't land very high on the list for me. I was surprised. I really thought I could have put it up near a different drum, but it ended up really close to Spitflower because I just cannot get over the idea that Tommy is part of the group, but not of the group. And it's really starting the cracks of I don't know Tommy, and I also know 0% about Jason other than he's competitive and people hate that about him for some reason. Also, I don't think he's competitive because it hasn't come up in an episode since, but not much has actually come up. Almost every part of Jason's personality is kind of deferring to others that he feels like knows more, and maybe that's supposed to read as humility, but I haven't seen him teach one of his karate classes in a while. It feels like he spars with other Rangers, but I don't get a sense that he's stronger than Tommy. He seems like he's not even necessarily as like he spars with Trini, but it feels like if she needed to, she could take him. Which is not bad by any stretch of the imagination. I just wish that I got a sense of where it was going and why it's part of his personality. I know we're gonna get a Mirror of Destruction episode quite a bit later, but it can't really come soon enough. Like I want an episode for all of them that was as good as Foul Play in the Sky, which is definitely one of the better episodes, why it's so high on the list. And it really exemplifies why Kim works as a character and what she thinks about. You know, Zach has actually had a couple of episodes, including one kind of secret episode where it's like, this is how Zach steps up into leadership. These are his very interests. Whether or not I like it, we've had that for Trini. Billy has been pointed several times. Jason's supposed to be the leader. That's sort of the vibe they always sold him at, but I don't actually get that unless they're saying leadership is about deferment. Like the treatise doesn't make sense. Um, I do like that Bulk and Skull have mellowed out a bit. I don't know if I need them every episode. I can see why versions of Bulk and Skull have existed but haven't been in every episode in future iterations of the series. But yeah, when they do Bulk and Skull right, it does feel like a callback to like an Abbott and Costello, Chris Farley, pratfall, SNL sort of thing. But they're in a lot. They're obviously manipulatable. I know that they'll have an episode where they become Dream Rangers and then it'll be forgotten. Um, it's fine. These middle episodes feel like they're trying to figure out what to do with Tommy in a lot of ways. And that isn't bad, except it sort of comes at a cost of like, I can see the cracks in where the Sentai footage is actually sort of holding things back. So I'm waiting for when the American Ranger footage starts to come into in some ways. Um, yeah. So that was Life as a Masquerade. That's episode 25. Episode 26, Gung Ho, is going to use a veiled Halloween reference, I'm assuming. I don't actually remember, to talk about the super putties, which I guess the super putties are going to be brown based upon the dirt that they are tossing through the vaguely menacing looking never-ending story type machine. Um, yeah, I kind of like that this has elements of it could be a two-parter, but isn't a two-parter. I really do like that. And I love seeing Billy take charge as much as I'm like, but should he be? Um, I actually really like that idea. I don't know if it's a successful execution. Like, I feel like a show later on, like Shaolin Showdown, does a really good job with the intelligence and curiosity meets the physical aspect. The kind of last final thing is that when you watch this episode, it makes you think of Big Bad Beetleborgs a lot because the Elvis Frankenstein ghost guy that is sort of their mentor slash like secret pal or whatever. Like, I think they actually have this in a Beetleborg episode, this actual bad guy with the I do like the idea that he can take his bolts out and use them as like spinny type weapons. But really, besides the lasso and the fire breathing, it still feels like they have depowered the other Rangers in order to bring Tommy to the forefront. But he's still not in the group. Like he's of the group and their social stuff, but like they always have to track him down. 4 episodes of tracking Tommy down so he can come to the battle at the end really does feel like a selling point more than an organic thing, and it's starting to become a little wearisome. Um, so I'm hoping that does get resolved before he becomes the Red Zeo Ranger, because I know he's gonna be the Green and then the White Ranger for a while. Um, but I want to root for the success of this team, and I want to root for them as six, but it still feels like Tommy's not there quite yet. Um, it's a choice. And we'll see you next time for Gung Ho, where we learn about the super putties and maybe Rita will come hovering in on a giant boulder again, which was kind of fun. She doesn't have a tricycle anymore. Maybe Finster crashed it or Babu crashed it. But she hovers menacingly and talks about being nasty and evil on a brown boulder, which is kind of fun. So more of that next time. As Zordon likes to say to who's ever willing to listen, may the power protect you.